The restaurant's fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pallor on Brenda's face as Dale slid the photo across the table. It showed her, laughing, pressed against a man Dale didn't know, their mouths locked in a kiss. Patrons at nearby tables glanced over, drawn by the sudden silence, the stiff posture of the couple. "Just a kiss, Dale," she whispered, her eyes wide. "It doesn't mean anything." The booth vinyl felt cold beneath my hands. The first photo, a grainy print from a cell phone, lay between us, a stark accusation. Brenda's hand trembled as she pushed it back. "It's just a kiss, Dale," she said again, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the restaurant's background noise. "It doesn't mean anything. We were out with the girls from work. Just a fun night." My own voice felt thin, stripped of any warmth. "Who is he?" She looked away, down at her plate, where the untouched remains of a burger sat. "It's nobody. You'll just get mad." "I'm already mad, Brenda," I told her. "I want his name." She wouldn't meet my gaze. "What do you think I'm doing? Cheating? That's not what this is. We're still married. It was a stupid mistake, that's all." I reached into my pocket and pulled out another photo. This one was even clearer, taken from a different angle. It showed them in what looked like a bar, his hand resting on her hip, her head tilted back. A smile on her face that wasn't just fun. This smile was intimate. This time their bodies were closer, their connection unmistakable. Her eyes widened, scanning the image, and then she let it drop to the table, scattering crumbs from her plate. "No," she whispered almost to herself. "That's not right. That's not what happened." She reached across the table, her hands seeking mine, then tried to lean forward as if to embrace me, to press her head against my shoulder. I pulled back, the movement sharp and involuntary. The small gesture felt like a wall between us. "I'm leaving," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I need space." Her face crumpled. "Leaving? Where are you going?" "Dale, don't be ridiculous. This is just a misunderstanding. We can talk about this. You've never hit me, Dale. You wouldn't just leave over something like this." The comparison struck me hard. "And I never thought you'd do this," I countered, my voice flat. "We had trust, Brenda. It's gone." Later that night, the apartment felt suffocating. I packed a suitcase, mostly work clothes and essentials. Timmy was at his grandma's for the weekend, a stroke of luck that spared him this. Brenda followed me from room to room, her pleas echoing off the walls, her voice growing hoarse. "Please, Dale, we can fix this. You're still young, you need a reliable man. Don't throw everything away." I zipped the bag shut. "I'll call you about Timmy. Only for emergencies, Brenda." It was the only boundary I felt strong enough to draw. I drove until I found a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with exterior doors and thin walls. Inside, the stale air smelled of disinfectant and old smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, the fluorescent light from the bathroom cutting across the dark room. Divorce, alimony, single parenthood. The words circled in my mind, each one a stone dropped into an empty well. We had moved 1,000 miles from everything we knew, leaving my family in Ohio for my new engineering job out here. Brenda had found a job at a call center, and slowly her coworkers became our social circle. We spent holidays with them, went to barbecues. They were our friends. Now the thought of them, of their knowing glances, made my stomach turn. I felt adrift, stranded on an island of my own making, with only the cold, impersonal hum of the motel air conditioner for company. Loneliness pressed in on me, a physical weight. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, and sometime in the early hours, the grief finally broke through, hot and overwhelming. I cried silently until exhaustion claimed me. The next morning, my phone buzzed with texts, not from Brenda, but from her friends. Donna, in particular, was persistent. "Dale, we heard what happened. We're so sorry. Brenda's a mess. Can we talk? Just us girls. Come over tonight." A knot tightened in my gut. Why would they want to talk to me? This felt wrong, like being lured into a spider's web. I texted back, "Thanks, Donna. I appreciate it. I'm not up for coming over, but if you want to grab a coffee, I could meet you somewhere public. Maybe the diner on Main?" I needed to hear what they had to say, but I also needed a way out if it went south. The Angus Steakhouse was brighter than the diner, the red vinyl booth stark under the overhead lights. As I walked in, I saw them gathered already, a cluster of faces that usually meant casual Friday nights. Donna, Mike, and a couple of other women from Brenda's call center. Brenda herself sat among them, her eyes red-rimmed. They stopped talking the moment I stepped through the double doors, their heads turning in unison. They had been strategizing, arranging their story. It was plain on their faces. Brenda started to rise, a desperate, reaching movement, her hand extending toward me. I held up a hand, a quiet stop sign. "Don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the bustling room. I walked past her, past the tight circle of her friends, and settled into the booth farthest from them, facing the door. A waiter appeared offering menus. Donna, ever the organizer, quickly pointed to the empty seat beside me. "Here, Dale, plenty of room." She tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The menu felt heavy in my hands. The group, prompted by Donna, started to talk about ordering. Mike, usually quick with a joke, looked at his plate, then at the menu, then at the table. "So what's everyone thinking? I could go for a ribeye." I laid the two photos on the red checkered tablecloth, sliding them into the center of the table. The image of Brenda, pressed against a man I didn't know, filled the space where their conversation had been. The first photo, then the second, more intimate one. The chatter died. "You all wanted to help," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my gut. "You wanted to talk. Fine. Here's how you can help. Tell me his name." The silence that followed was heavy, thick as the steakhouse's gravy. No one spoke. No one met my gaze. Donna's forced smile evaporated. Mike cleared his throat, then looked down again. The other women shifted in their seats, their eyes darting from the photos to Brenda, then back to their laps. Not one of them denied knowing him. Not one of them offered a name. It was my answer. My stomach churned, but not from hunger. These weren't my friends. They were Brenda's friends, protecting Brenda. The realization wasn't a shock, not really, just a dull, confirming thud. I pushed myself out of the booth. "I guess I've lost my appetite," I said. The words came out sounding calmer than I felt. I didn't look at Brenda. I didn't look at any of them. "Dale, please." Brenda's voice cracked, a desperate plea that echoed behind me. "Don't go. We can talk." But the others remained silent. No one else tried to stop me. No one called out a goodbye or an offer to truly help. Just Brenda's lonely, fading cry. Back at the motel, the truth of my isolation settled in like the dust on the lampshade. It wasn't just Brenda, it was the whole damn social circle. They were all in on it, or at least complicit in their silence. My mind started piecing together old fragments. Brenda had once told me about an ex-boyfriend, a smooth talker, the kind who always had an angle. She'd laughed about it then, said she was wiser now. I'd believed her. Then there was the 8 guy at her work. About 6 months ago, she'd mentioned him, just offhand. He'd been fired, she said, for something vague, something about harassment. She'd been evasive when I'd asked for details, brushing it off as office drama. He was tall, kind of scruffy, she'd mumbled. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now the description nagged at me. Could he be the man in the photo? The timing felt wrong for a current affair if he'd been fired 6 months ago. Or was he not fired, but left, or still around? I pulled out my laptop, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard as I logged into our joint bank account. I needed a clear head, something concrete to focus on. I scrolled through the transactions, looking for anything unusual. And there it was, plain as day, just 3 weeks ago, a withdrawal for $2,000. No explanation, no corresponding purchase, just $2,000, yin, signed by Brenda. The $2,000 withdrawal was just the beginning. I stayed up late, hunched over my laptop in the motel room's dim light, digging through months of bank statements and credit card bills. What I found was a slow, steady bleed, small, unexplained purchases on her personal credit card, often at places I didn't recognize, cash advances that were never discussed. The balance on her card, usually paid off each month, was now creeping steadily upward. It wasn't a single grand theft, but a quiet, insidious siphoning. She had been funneling money, not in a rush, but carefully, incrementally. The cold realization settled in. This wasn't just about a kiss or even an affair. This was about sustained deception, financial and emotional. By morning, I knew I needed professional help. This was beyond what I could handle alone. I found a local lawyer, Mr. Henderson, whose online profile described him as specializing in complex divorce cases. His office was in a quiet brick building downtown, the kind that whispered of old money and serious business. Mr. Henderson was older, with a neat gray beard and eyes that missed nothing. He listened patiently, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad as I laid out the story. The photos, Brenda's evasions, the silent friends, the $2,000, the mounting debt. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his teeth. "This isn't just about infidelity, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice calm, pragmatic. "This is about marital assets, potential fraud. You need to document everything. Every text, every email, every financial discrepancy. Keep copies of those statements. Note down any strange behavior. We need a clear, undeniable narrative of what's been happening." He advised discretion, to gather my evidence quietly without tipping off Brenda. The thought of spying on my own wife felt sordid, but the alternative, losing everything, including Timmy, Timmy, felt worse. So I started. I made a folder on my computer, password protected, logging every detail. I thought back to the times Brenda had clutched her phone to her chest when I walked into a room. The way she'd quickly flipped it face down on the table when I came home from work. The long, hushed conversations she'd had in the other room, telling me later it was just Donna. A cold fury began to simmer beneath my skin. The sheer audacity of her deceit, playing me for a fool while I worked to support our family. I remembered my career, the years I'd poured into becoming an engineer, securing a good salary, how I'd encouraged Brenda to be a stay-at-home mom after Timmy was born, thinking it would be better for him, better for us. She'd gone back to work at the call center part-time a few years later, saying she was bored. And now this, all while I was bringing in the money, building a life for us. My phone rang. It was Brenda. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me. "Dale?" Her voice was soft, fragile. "Please, just come home. I miss you. We can fix this. I can explain everything." "Explain what, Brenda?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Explain the photos? Explain the $2,000? Explain why your friends wouldn't even give me his name?" A pause, then a sigh. "It's complicated, Dale. I can't explain over the phone. You have to come home." "No," I said firmly. "Not until you give me some real answers. Not until you're actually transparent." Her tone shifted, hardening. "If you don't come back, Dale, I'll take Timmy. You won't see him, I swear to God." The threat hung in the air, cold and calculated. My hand tightened on the phone. This wasn't just a desperate wife anymore. This was a cornered animal lashing out. "Don't," I warned her, my voice low and dangerous. Then I hung up, the click of the connection severing the last thread of hope. My resolve, already battered, solidified into something hard and unyielding. She wouldn't manipulate me with Timmy. Not anymore. I thought about her friends again. Donna, Mike, the others from the call center, their unwavering loyalty to Brenda, their refusal to speak up at the restaurant. Brenda had always been close to her coworkers, spending more and more time with them outside of work. Dinners, drinks, girls' nights out that stretched late into the evening. A gut feeling told me this affair wasn't some impulsive mistake, a mere kiss on a dance floor. It felt deeper, more ingrained, entwined with her new social life, a world I had no part in. The motel room became my command center. Following Mr. Henderson's advice, I installed a tracking application on Brenda's phone, a quiet invasion I justified by the enormity of her deception. I also set up a small, discreet camera in the home office, aimed at the desk where she often left her purse and phone. It felt wrong, but the threat to Timmy, the betrayal, pushed me past any moral qualms. The data started to flow in. Brenda was spending more nights away, her excuses flimsy. Late work meeting, staying at Donna's, too tired to drive home. But the tracker painted a different picture. Her phone frequently pinged from an apartment complex not far from her call center. The address looked familiar somehow, a place I'd driven past countless times. A few days later, a more complete picture emerged. A name, Frank. Frank was the man in the photos, and Frank was indeed the former IT manager, the one Brenda had vaguely mentioned as fired months ago. My gut clenched. He hadn't just been fired. He was now being supported by my money. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud, the $2,000 withdrawal, the creeping credit card debt. It wasn't for shopping sprees, not entirely. It was for Frank. She wasn't just cheating, she was bankrolling her affair with my earnings. I went home one afternoon, ostensibly to pick up some more clothes. Brenda was there, surprised to see me. I tried a test. Heard anything about that old IT guy from your work? I asked casually, watching her face. Her eyes flickered with a raw panic she couldn't hide. Who, Frank? No, we... Her voice was too high, too quick. She started babbling about old office gossip, about how he was a bad apple. Her evasiveness, her exaggerated efforts to change the subject, confirmed it. Mr. Henderson had advised me to get more solid evidence of the financial misconduct, something irrefutable. But my mind was already racing toward another strategy. Brenda's parents, Martha and Hank, were devout people, traditional to their core. They believed in the sanctity of marriage, in right and wrong, in duty. If anyone could make Brenda see sense, it would be them. They needed to know. I drove out to their small, neat house in the countryside, the same house Brenda grew up in. The porch swing creaked gently in the autumn breeze. Hank opened the door, a surprised but welcoming smile on his face. Martha in the kitchen waved. Dale, what a surprise. Come in. Come in. I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless holiday meals. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm, almost clinical, as I laid out the photos. I explained about the money, the secret phone calls, the tracker's data. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hank, usually stoic, looked utterly bewildered. Brenda? Our Brenda? He murmured, shaking his head. No, Dale, there must be a mistake. She wouldn't. They tried to deny it, to find an explanation, but the photos were undeniable. The weight of the evidence, presented so plainly, slowly broke through their disbelief. Their faces, usually warm and welcoming, now held a mixture of shock and profound sadness. Just as Hank was reaching for a tissue, the front door burst open. Brenda, her eyes wide and furious, immediately locked onto me. What the hell are you doing here, Dale? She demanded, her voice raw with anger. Donna called me. She said you were here, stirring up trouble. Her parents looked between us, caught. I'm telling your parents the truth, Brenda, I stated, rising slowly from the table. The truth you wouldn't tell them. The truth you wouldn't tell me. He's lying, Mom, Dad. He's fabricating everything, she cried, turning to them, and he's trying to ruin me. He's crazy. He's unstable. That's why I left. The argument erupted, filling the small kitchen with shouted accusations and desperate denials. Their quiet, orderly home shattered by the ugliness of our unraveling marriage. Brenda's accusations of fabrication hung heavy in the air, but my evidence spoke for itself. I pulled out printouts of the bank statements, circling the $2,000 withdrawal, pointing to the rising credit card debt. I showed them screenshots from the tracking app, detailing dates and locations. Each piece, laid bare, chipped away at Brenda's denials and her parents' initial disbelief. Martha, her face etched with sorrow, finally crumpled onto a kitchen chair, tears streaming down her face. Brenda, she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. How could you do this? To Dale? To Timmy? To us? The realization of her daughter's deep-seated lies and betrayal had finally broken through. Hank, usually a man of few words, stood rigidly by the counter, his jaw tight. He looked at Brenda, his gaze stern and unwavering. Brenda, he said, his voice low and dangerous, tell us the whole truth. Now. Cornered, stripped of her lies, Brenda finally buckled. She admitted to the affair with Frank, but even then she tried to spin it, to minimize her culpability. He was manipulative, Dad. He threatened me, said he'd tell Dale everything, tell everyone at work. If I didn't help him out, he said he'd expose me. She painted herself as a victim, coerced into the financial support. I watched her, a bitter understanding dawning. It wasn't just an affair driven by desire, it was an affair fueled by blackmail, by fear. The financial drain wasn't just a gift, it was protection money. The thought made my stomach churn, a fresh wave of disgust. She wasn't just cheating, she was complicit in her own extortion and drawing our family's finances into the abyss with her. Martha buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Hank slowly shook his head, a look of profound disappointment and shame clouding his features. Their silence spoke volumes, a condemnation far heavier than any shouted accusation. "I'm filing for divorce," I told him, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "And I'm seeking full custody of Timmy. His well-being is my only concern. He deserves stability, a home free from this kind of deception." Brenda turned to them, her voice cracking. "Mom, Dad, you can't let him do this. You have to help me." Hank finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Brenda, we raised you to know right from wrong. We can't condone this. We can't help you with this." I walked out of their house, leaving Brenda pleading with her parents. There was no joy in my grim satisfaction, only a hollow ache. The truth was out, but the collateral damage was immense. The next few weeks were a blur of work and preparation. I continued to gather evidence, compiling every shred of information I could find about Frank. His past employment, any public records, any connections to Brenda's friends. The thought that Donna and the others knew more than they let on, that they were actively helping to cover up the affair and possibly the blackmail, festered in my mind. The Angus Steakhouse confrontation replayed in my head, their deliberate silence a fresh sting. I reached out to some of my old college friends, guys I hadn't seen much of since moving here. Their calls and texts were a lifeline, a connection to a world outside Brenda's orbit. They offered no judgment, just quiet support and a listening ear. I began to focus more intensely on my work, throwing myself into projects, finding a semblance of control in the structured world of engineering. It was a way to rebuild, piece by piece, not just my finances, but my sense of self. The pain was still there, a constant throb, but beneath it, a growing clarity about the future, about what I needed to do for Timmy and for myself. Life's choices can be costly, and the consequences often stretch further than we can imagine. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Mr. Henderson suggested we needed to connect all the dots, especially regarding Frank. So I hired a private investigator, a former cop named Stan. Stan was a quiet man with a knowing gaze, the kind of person who could blend into a crowd but notice everything. His fee was steep, but the stakes were higher. Stan's findings started to trickle in, painting a disturbingly clearer picture of Frank. Frank had a history of job hopping, never staying long, leaving behind a trail of vague resignations and outright firings. His financial records showed a pattern of living beyond his means, punctuated by sudden infusions of cash. The most damning discovery was a previous relationship, a woman in another town, who had faced a strikingly similar situation involving financial blackmail. It wasn't a one-off. Frank had a modus operandi: target women in stable, often financially comfortable relationships, exploit their vulnerabilities, and then bleed them dry. It confirmed that he had indeed been fired from Brenda's company for similar manipulative behavior, not for generic harassment, as Brenda had implied. The evidence also began to shift the narrative around Brenda. While Frank was clearly a predator, the timeline and nature of her financial assistance suggested she hadn't just been an unwilling victim. She'd been a complicit participant for a significant period, making conscious choices to funnel money to him. The $2,000 withdrawal wasn't a one-time desperate act. It was part of a longer pattern. Stan didn't stop there. He also looked into Brenda's friends. The results were telling. Donna, it turned out, had known about the affair far earlier than the restaurant confrontation, actively helping Brenda cover her tracks, fabricating excuses for her absences, and even helping to facilitate meetings. Mike and the other husbands, Stan found, were largely oblivious, typical Midwestern guys too busy with their own lives to notice the subtle shifts. Their wives, however, had known parts of the truth, often playing along, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. The silent collusion at the steakhouse made more sense now. They weren't just protecting Brenda. They were protecting their own complicity. Then an anonymous email landed in my inbox. It was from Frank's previous victim, a woman named Emily, who had read a local news blurb about the divorce and recognized the pattern. She provided a detailed witness statement outlining Frank's methods. The initial charm, the gradual emotional manipulation, the threats, the escalating demands for money. Her words resonated with the financial activity I had uncovered. It was a mirror image of Brenda's situation. This anonymous tip was the concrete evidence Mr. Henderson had been waiting for. "We have a very strong case, Dale," Mr. Henderson told me, his voice confident. "Divorce, custody, and exposing the financial fraud. With Emily's statement and Stan's findings, we can show a clear pattern of exploitation by Frank in Brenda's knowing participation. This strengthens your position significantly." The next step was difficult, but necessary. I decided to involve the police. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a criminal matter. The financial fraud, the blackmail, Frank's history, it all warranted an official investigation. I provided all the gathered evidence to the authorities: the photos, the bank statements, the tracking data, Stan's reports, and Emily's witness statement. They took it seriously. A detective was assigned, and a formal investigation began. Brenda's world, built on a foundation of lies and secrets, was beginning to crumble. Legal papers, criminal investigations, the walls were closing in. I felt a profound sense of justice slowly taking shape, a cold, hard resolve solidifying within me. But the emotional toll remained heavy. There was no joy, only a grim determination to see this through for Timmy. The legal storm gathered quickly. Days after I'd given my evidence to the police, I received a call from the detective. They had executed a search warrant at Frank's apartment. They found texts, emails, and financial records corroborating Emily's story and my own. The detective confirmed what I already knew. Frank was arrested, charged with fraud and attempted blackmail. A small cold part of me felt a sense of vindication, but mostly it was just exhaustion. Brenda was brought in for questioning. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, informed me she tried to stick to her story, the one about Frank being a manipulator and her being a victim. But the police had the photos, the financial records, and Frank's own admissions. Her story, built on thin air, quickly unraveled. Mr. Henderson officially filed for divorce, citing not just infidelity, but the significant financial misconduct Brenda had engaged in. The papers landed on her doorstep, undeniable proof that I was serious. Brenda's lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Miller, wasted no time trying to counterattack. Her strategy was clear: paint me as the vindictive husband, the control freak who was harassing his wife, making false accusations. She attempted to dismiss the evidence as mere marital discord, my actions as overreactions fueled by jealousy. But the police investigation into Frank put a serious dent in her narrative. I spent hours with Mr. Henderson, meticulously preparing my testimony. He drilled me on the facts, the dates, the amounts. "Stick to what you know, Dale," he'd advised. "No emotion, just the documented evidence." It was hard to remain dispassionate when my life was being ripped apart, but I understood the necessity. Timmy's welfare became the absolute center of the custody battle. Ms. Miller tried to portray me as an absent father, consumed by work. I pushed back, showing photos of me and Timmy at the park, at his school events. I made sure to shield Timmy from the nastier aspects of the divorce. He was staying with my parents now, a safe distance from the unfolding chaos. I called him every night, reassuring him of my love, telling him that even though Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live together anymore, we both loved him more than anything. He was confused, quiet, asking questions I didn't have easy answers for. Then came the subpoenas. Donna, Mike, and the other friends from Brenda's call center circle were called to testify. Donna, under oath, faced with the prospect of perjury charges, finally broke. She reluctantly admitted to actively covering for Brenda, to knowing about the affair for months, to making excuses for Brenda's nights away. Her confession was a dull blow, confirming the extent of the betrayal. Mike, her husband, looked genuinely shocked and disappointed in court, his face a mask of disbelief as he realized the depth of his wife's complicity and his own unwitting manipulation. Martha and Hank, Brenda's parents, also provided character statements. Their words were delivered with quiet sadness, detailing Brenda's evasiveness, her financial irresponsibility, and their own profound disappointment. They didn't condemn her outright, but their grief was a powerful testimony against her actions. The financial forensics team, brought in by Mr. Henderson, laid bare the full extent of Brenda's embezzlement. The detailed reports showed money siphoned from our joint accounts, credit card debts spiraling, and a clear pattern of payments to Frank's accounts. It wasn't just $2,000, it was closer to 20, maybe more, spread out over months, chipping away at our savings, our future. I sat in the courtroom, listening to the unraveling of my life, the public airing of my most private pain. Each piece of evidence, each testimony was another nail in the coffin of my marriage. The weight of it all was immense, a heavy cloak of exhaustion and sorrow. The divorce trial began, a sterile, fluorescent-lit arena where our lives were dissected. Each day brought tense testimonies and intricate legal arguments. Mr. Henderson, with his calm demeanor and meticulous preparation, systematically presented the evidence. The photos, the bank statements, the tracking data, Stan's reports, Emily's witness statement. Each piece was laid out, calmly and factually. There was no room for doubt about Brenda's infidelity or the extent of her financial fraud. Brenda's lawyer, Ms. Miller, tried. She attempted to paint me as an angry, controlling husband, to discredit my evidence as the actions of a man seeking revenge. But her attempts fell flat against the sheer volume of undeniable proof. The judge listened, impassive as the truth unfolded. A pivotal moment came when Frank, facing serious criminal charges, made a deal with the prosecution. He testified against Brenda, detailing the financial scheme, how he'd leveraged her fear and complicity for money. His testimony, self-serving as it was, sealed Brenda's fate, confirming her active role in the embezzlement. The final ruling was delivered with gravity. The judge cited Brenda's instability, her prolonged financial malfeasance, and her profound betrayal of trust. The court granted me full custody of Timmy, recognizing the need for a stable, secure environment for him. Brenda was ordered to pay back a substantial sum from the embezzled funds, a repayment plan stretching into the foreseeable future. Her career at the call center, already precarious due to the police investigation and her forced absences, was effectively over. Brenda's social circle, once a tight-knit group, dissolved under the weight of the revelations. Donna, her complicity exposed, faced public scorn and strained friendships, her reputation irrevocably tarnished. Mike, her husband, looked broken in court. The consequences rippled outward, touching everyone who had chosen to be silent. The judge's voice, clear and firm, emphasized the betrayal not just of me, but of Timmy. The impact on a child, the judge stated, was paramount. As the gavel fell, a hollow victory settled over me. The legal resolution was clear, definitive. But it couldn't fully heal the emotional wounds. They were deep, raw, and still bleeding. Brenda broke down in court, a guttural sob escaping her as the full weight of her actions crashed down. Her future, once seemingly secure, was now a landscape of financial debt, legal repercussions, and shattered relationships. She looked lost, utterly alone. I took Timmy home that day, not to the old house, but to a smaller apartment I'd rented. A fresh start. It was quiet, just the two of us. He held my hand tightly as we walked in. Our new life as a single-parent family had begun. I looked at Timmy, at his innocent face, and reflected on the price of infidelity. It wasn't just a broken marriage, it was a shattered family, a life uprooted, trust destroyed, and years of rebuilding ahead. The emotional recovery was only just beginning, a long, arduous journey. But I had Timmy, and I had a clear path forward. I resolved to move, focusing all my energy on him, on providing him with stability and love. I would rebuild my sense of self, learn to trust again, not just others, but myself. It would take time, but for Timmy, for me, it was the only way. Months turned into a year. Timmy and I settled into a new routine, finding comfort in predictability. My engineering career became a focused anchor, and fatherhood, a constant source of purpose. The weekly therapy sessions continued, a slow, methodical process of sifting through the layers of trauma and betrayal. Timmy, resilient as children often are, adjusted. He thrived under my steady, unwavering care, his laughter once again filling our new, smaller home. Brenda, I heard through the grapevine, faced the full brunt of her choices. Unemployment, her name whispered in circles, social ostracization. Her parents maintained contact, but their calls were infrequent, strained. She tried to reach me sometimes, desperate pleas for forgiveness. I kept the boundaries firm, especially for Timmy's sake. There was no going back. Frank remained incarcerated, his manipulative schemes finally halted. I sold the old family home. It felt like shedding an old skin, ridding ourselves of memories too painful to keep. With Timmy's cheerful input, we bought a smaller, cozier house, decorating it together, making it truly ours. I reconnected with old friends, genuine connections replacing the shallow ones lost. New hobbies emerged, simple Midwestern pleasures. Fishing, working in the garage, long walks with Timmy. The ordeal had carved scars, deep and permanent, but they no longer defined me. They were reminders of what I survived, the strength I unearthed. Lessons in trust and resilience, hard-earned. The future was still uncertain, an open road, but I faced it now with a quiet determination, Timmy's hand firmly in mine. We were rebuilding, brick by quiet brick, moving forward.